Hey everybody, it's Safi and Marco Dish Out on Movies, the only movie review show on YouTube to review movies in terms of food. It's just Marco here once again, and I am here today to do a spontaneous video. And I was really excited about doing this for some reason, even though it is a very hard thing to do. Why? Because basically there are no trilogies. Every trilogy has to have a fourth, a fifth, a sixth. I'm not saying that as a complaint. I'm just saying that as a fact. Back in the year 2000, you could have said all these different movie trilogies are just trilogies. But nowadays, there's no trilogies at all, basically. We're very limited in terms of trilogies to select from for this list. A lot of these are kind of cheating, and I'll talk about that when I get to them. And what I'm doing is I'm ranking the top 10 movie trilogies of all time. And this is just my personal opinion. First off, there are a couple that I would have liked to have put on this list, but I haven't seen the full trilogies. So, the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids trilogy, I really love those first two movies, but then I have never seen the one about the giant baby or whatever, and so I can't put that trilogy. And then the Star Wars original trilogy, it is technically a trilogy, and it is very deserving. It is definitely one of the best movie series all on its own. But I haven't seen them in a long time, and so I can't really confidently talk about them and say, yeah, this is as good as this series that I'm a lot more, familiar with. But I will say that, I guess Star Wars is an honorable mention. Not the prequels, not the sequels, just the original trilogy. Although, if you need a good sleeping pill, if you have trouble going to sleep, if you put on any of those prequel movies, you will fall asleep. And then, if you need a series to piss you off, make you mad, and get you in a state of just absolute anger, the sequels will always be there, unfortunately, because everyone was so excited that Star Wars would be bought by Disney, which is a terrible decision. I knew that from the very beginning. I was one of the few people who was like, ugh, and everyone else was like, yay, and I knew what was coming. Anyways, oh yeah, there's also The Godfather. I have not seen The Godfather 2 or 3, and Lord of the Rings trilogy. I know that there are some that would make people go, oh, why haven't you seen that? What about that? What about that? Oh, wait a second. Oh, shit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10. Oh, shit. I already fucked up this list. I left off the Toy Story trilogy. Okay, well, I guess I will put the how did I forget the Toy Story trilogy? I mean, that was right at the top of my head. Okay, I'm going to put the Toy Story trilogy as an honorable mention. First off, the first movie, it's a great, simple kids movie. I'm not one of those people who is bothered by the quote-unquote out-of-date animation. I kind of like the animation and how personalized it is and how dynamic it is and creative. Even though it's not perfect in terms of technical quality, I really like the style anyway. So, and then I really love how Woody and Buzz become friends and I love Sid as a villain. He's a great movie villain. Number 2 is even better. I mean, although I do feel like the first one is better in terms of, I don't know, like when you make a Toy Story movie, I really want to have a lot of that feeling of toys being at home, playing around when the kids aren't around and stuff. You don't really get that a lot in part 2, but instead you get this really cool and fun adventure where Woody, of course, is trying to save Squeaky, and then he gets kidnapped by Al from Al's toy barn so that he can be sold to Japan. To be honest, this is a great, great movie. I'll admit that the part with Molly and Jesse is very, very hard to watch, even if you've already seen the movie 1,000 times. And I don't know, it's a great movie. I definitely think it's a great sequel. I don't necessarily think it's the greatest. Now that I've had years to think about it, I don't necessarily think it's the greatest Toy Story movie, because after watching them back to back, I kind of missed some of the elements of part 1. But still, it is such a great sequel. The fact that, if you guys don't know, this movie got deleted almost entirely from history. And it got saved because this woman, she illegally downloaded the movie on a thumb drive to take home and like show to her family. And since she illegally downloaded this movie, it is the only reason that it actually got seen. And so I just think that's incredible. The fact that, companies, they just pretend like this free movie thing is always a bad thing. Like, no, it's not. Like, just in terms of talking honestly, there's been a lot of times in the past where I wasn't going to watch a movie or see it or support it, and then I watched it for free on YouTube or on another website, and then I went and I purchased that movie for real. And I said, wow, this movie deserves support, and so I'm going to support it. That never, the opposite effect really happens when I see something good in theaters. If I see something good in theaters, I just kind of forget about it, honestly. So, and then the third Toy Story movie is, I think, the weakest entry in the trilogy, in the original trilogy. Because, of course, then you have what is one of the worst kids' movies ever made, Toy Story 4. But Toy Story 3, it was a really enjoyable experience to see this movie in theaters. I'll never forget, it was the last day of a certain summer camp, and then I went right after camp was over, and I saw this movie in theaters. We had some junior mints, and they were stuck inside the box, so we had to rip open the box and eat them, peel them off of the box on the inside and eat them. And it's just another fun adventure movie. The only problem, there's a couple of problems. Number 1, I did not like how I did not like the villain and how he was so similar to Stinky Pete. The Mr. Lotso, the teddy bear, whatever. I did not like how similar he was to Stinky Pete from part 2. I thought that was a major flaw that nobody even really, people mention it, but that they act like it's not a problem. Like, this isn't Halloween where that the villain is Michael Myers. This is Toy Story, where they can literally do whatever they want. And instead of creating like a new and interesting villain, like what if they had it where one of the children at this kindergarten is able to talk to toys. And the kid is pure evil, and you could have done all the same stuff with Lotso with this kid, and it would have been pretty interesting, right? No, we have to do Stinky Pete, but as a teddy bear that smells like strawberries. And then they even kind of ripped off the Molly thing where he gets abandoned by his owner. And then there were some really good parts. Like, the movie was very enjoyable, even with all the problems that I have. And it was a good third movie, although it was a terrible conclusion to the trilogy. Why? I'm going to get really controversial here. Sorry, but you guys are just going to have to deal with it. So, at the end of Toy Story 3, Woody spent a lot of the movie with this girl named Bonnie, and she seemed like a nice character in this movie. Let's not talk about part 4, let's just talk about part 3. She seemed like a really cool kid, but I was really excited for Woody to get back to Andy, and for him to be with Andy again, as well as Buzz. I felt like, even though Andy is going to college, why wouldn't he take these toys that are these treasures to him? Why would he just give them to this little girl? Like, it is just the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Like, I can imagine going to a thrift store and getting a really cool, unique toy for a kid for, like, nothing. Like, you pay for what it weighs, and then you pay, like, nothing. And you could go get a really cool toy and give it to Bonnie, but no. Andy decides to give his one and only Woody, his one and only Buzz, all the toys given to Bonnie. And I just thought that was the worst fucking thing. It was just terrible. And I'll tell you guys something. Why would you... Who keeps their toys? I do. A lot of people do. Like, if they're treasure toys, if they're toys that mean something. I have my Kipper, the dog toy, on a desk over there. I have a Count Dracula toy on the desk over there sitting next to him. And these toys have been with me ever since I was a kid. And no, I'm not going to get rid of them. So, sorry, I'm not giving those toys to Bonnie. Bonnie can go jump off a cliff. So overall, this is a pretty decent trilogy. You can enjoy this trilogy a lot, even though it ends on such a downer note. The fact that, and you think about this too, part 4 just, it's the worst thing in human history. Because you watch part 3, and you think about, if Andy ever wanted to go back and visit Bonnie, he's going to go back there and find out that this little bitch lost his precious prized treasure toys. And he's going to get really pissed off. Like, I can imagine, I swear, I would never, ever hurt an animated child. But I swear to God, if I were Andy in Toy Story 5, and I went back to Bonnie, and I saw that Woody was not there, and that for some reason there was a fucking sheriff's badge on fucking Jesse, I would go full John Wick on Bonnie. In the movie is what I mean. Like, in the movie, is Andy the character? Like, I would pull out I would get Sid's number, and I would be like, hey Sid, I know you don't like to hurt toys anymore, but I got this little bitch who threw away Woody and then made Jesse the sheriff. Like, ugh. Okay, so yeah, see, this is why I knew that part 3 was going to lead to disaster, because I knew that if they ever made a part 4, it would undo all the great things in the trilogy. It would just ruin everything, and I was right. So now we're finally to the top 10. At 15 minutes in, number 10 is Bill and Ted, the trilogy. Now with this one, I'm a little bit less familiar, but I just think that this is a really good feel-good trilogy. It's a very fun series of movies. You got the first one, Excellent Adventure, which is what I think is one of the greatest 80s movies of all time. It's just complete 80s, 80s, 80s. The characters are really good and likable, and they're not like characters from nowadays. It's just a lot of fun. It's a great time travel movie, too. I mean, say what you will about, a movie like Back to the Future, but I think that Bill and Ted's time travel is really good as well. The time travel elements and, how they play into the plot. And then the second one, I'm a little bit less familiar with that one, honestly. I only saw it once, but from what I remember, it was pretty good and pretty funny, and it was a great sequel to the first one. And then the third one, it's not very good, but it's still, like, if you just turn your brain off, have fun, and just enjoy it, because, it's a movie, you can have fun. Like, this is just a fun trilogy. It's a solid trilogy. Like, if you go from 1, 2, 3, there's not really much of a drop-off. The biggest problem with a movie trilogy is that there's always that drop-off. There's always that really good 1, really good 2, and then bad 3. Or a bad number 2, but then a good 3. Like, it's really hard to find trilogies that are good because they're so inconsistent. And at least this trilogy is pretty consistent in terms of being entertaining and funny and wholesome. There were some things in the third one that I didn't like, though. Like, I definitely think this is definitely number 10. I mean, there's no way I could put this any higher. Sorry. Number 9 is the modern Planet of the Apes trilogy. So you have the first movie, Rise of the Planet of the Apes. I thought that this was a very, very good, solid movie. It was a good origin story. It had a lot of heart. It had James Franco, and somehow it wasn't terrible. And the other, I think it was John Lithgow was in this movie. I can't really remember. He did a great job. The love interest was pretty good. And I just really love this origin story. I really think that it's an underrated origin movie. And then the second one, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, I think is one of the greatest movies ever made. It is just, it's flawless. It is just an incredible, epic, action-packed movie. There's nothing bad that I have to say about it. There's so much greatness in this movie, and nobody even talks about it anymore. Do you know why? Because of the next one, War for the Planet of the Apes. This is the movie when I figured out that Matt Reeves was not the Lord and Savior of movies. War for the Planet of the Apes was a huge, monumental disappointment. I mean, it was called War for the Planet of the Apes. We were expecting this epic follow-up, this action-packed, intense, brutal battle to the death between humans and apes, where apes would win in the end. And instead, it starts off and we find out it's already been months. They've already been fighting all the humans and killing them. And it's like, oh wow, oh wow. So basically the whole movie that we wanted to see, that happened before the movie even started. Sorry. And the action sequences in this movie are terrible. if you want to even call them action sequences. And then it instead of being a war movie, it turns into a really depressing Holocaust movie where they have Woody Harrelson as this bad guy. And I will admit, he was a very good character, just in a bad story. Like, I really thought that he was a good villain, but the movie was terrible. And there was this whole subplot about this deaf girl, and it was just, oh, God, this movie was piss poor. I mean, it was a well-made movie. It's another one where if you turn your brain off and pretend like the other two don't exist, you can enjoy it and just pretend like you don't have expectations when you watch a trilogy, and you go from 1, 2, 3, but anyways. And then the ending, of course, Caesar dies. Wow, that's really a great ending. Not. I mean, it was... Ugh. God, that was disappointing. But I will say, it's a solid set of movies. I would not complain if you put on the third movie. I would just leave the room. And, oh yeah, that actually happened, by the way. It happened when we were on vacation in 2018. It was playing at the shitty hotel where they advertised that they have free Wi-Fi, and they did not have free Wi-Fi at all. That was a misadvertisement. This movie was on, and I just kind of sat there on the stairs leading to the other bedroom, just kind of like trying not to watch that piece of crap. Like, I was just totally unengaged. Number 8 is the Addams Family Trilogy, and I know you're saying, what Addams Family Trilogy? Well, suck on this. You have the Addams Family, the Addams Family Values, and the Addams Family Reunion. This is a cheat trilogy because technically it's not really a trilogy, but I would consider it a trilogy. So you have the first one. It's a decent kids movie. It's funny. Christopher Lloyd does a great job. Raul Julia does a great job. The casting in this movie is 100% incredible. But the plot is kind of mixed. It's a mixed bag, It's not as good as it could have been. I felt like it really fell flat in the third act, and it just became way too goofy and cartoony. But then you have the second movie, Addams Family Values. I felt like that this was a huge improvement. I really love this movie. I love all the different things that happen with Wednesday going to the Girl Scout, not the Girl Scout, the summer camp, and then she does that whole Native American thing with the play. I love the plot with Uncle Fester and Joan Cusack. I mean, this movie is just, it's really, really good. It's really funny. Huge improvement on the first movie, even though the first movie is a good movie, too. Funny story, when I was a kid, I didn't even know there was a first movie. I thought the Addams Family Values and then Addams Family Reunion were the only movies in the series. And then all of a sudden, it was either me or my mom in Hollywood Video, and I found the first movie, and I was like, oh, cool, treasure. And then you have the third movie, Reunion, which is, I think, an underrated, fun kids movie. You have Tim Curry as Gomez. You have a lot of good casting in this movie. And honestly, it's a really funny movie. Like, I don't think that it's terrible. It's as other people do, because it's straight to video. So, they automatically are biased against everything that's straight to video. But I honestly think that it's a decent movie. Like, I could watch it again right now. I'm not going to, but I could. Like, anyways. And there's a great subplot in this movie too, where the Addams family, they're at this reunion, but then a couple of them stay home. I don't know what happened there. And then there's this couple, and they're staying at the Addams family mansion, and they're just getting tortured and effed up, and it's a really, as I said, highly recommend this trilogy. Number 7 is the Dark Knight trilogy. First off, you have Batman Begins, which is one of the greatest superhero movies ever made. Highly underrated. Highly, highly underrated. It's a very motivational movie. Christian Bale does a great job as Batman and Bruce Wayne, both characters. It's a really, really good movie. And in terms of comic book adaptation, even though it is going for the hyper-realistic route, it still manages to respect the characters and respect the source material, and at the same time, do its own thing. And I just really love this movie. One of the best superhero movies. And then you have number 2, The Dark Knight, which is like it's a masterpiece. Okay, it is a masterpiece objectively. There's so much action in the movie to love. When you think the movie is over, the movie is like, no, the movie is only halfway over. Sorry. There's another whole entire half of the movie that's almost even better than the first half. The Joker, one of the greatest movie villains of all time. I mean, I admit I was not a fan of the look of this Joker. And I still am kind of not a fan. Honestly, like, I think that it works for this trilogy, but I really prefer the classic Joker look from the comics, and then, like, the Arkham games. Like, I'm really not a huge fan of this kind of curly hair Joker. But he did such a perfect performance, Heath Ledger. The only flaw with this movie, huge flaw, the only flaw is that Batman in this movie is trash. This is not a Batman movie, it is a Joker movie. And I think that nobody even talks about that. Like, and Christian Bale even admitted it. He admitted that, the second movie, Joker completely steals the limelight. And it's true. And it's like, I felt like that was a huge flaw, because it's supposed to be a Batman movie regardless, and he's really not very, I mean, he's very, very he's just like a plot object. He's just there to do what he needs to do, and get from A to B. He's really not very good of a character in this movie, and when you put him up against Joker, it's like putting a steak next to, I don't know, like a piece of chewed bubble gum. Like, which would you rather choose, guys? A piece of chewed gum or a steak? Oh, I think you guys know exactly what you would choose. And then you have the third one, which was a huge disaster. I mean, Christopher Nolan has admitted he didn't even want to make the third movie. He was like, I don't want to make a third movie. The movie series ended at the second one. And so he threw this piece of trash together, and I will admit the soundtrack is really good. The soundtrack, it was created separately from the movie, and it's very, very good. But this movie, it had so many plot holes, so many plot conveniences. The whole art of hyperrealism completely caved in on Christopher Nolan. This is a disastrous movie. It's not even an action movie. It's like a stupid 3-hour drama movie with action mixed in. Anne Hathaway as Catwoman. Good to look at, but not good as the character. Sorry. And then you have Bane. Bane is a disaster in this movie. You think, wow, he's going to be a really intimidating villain. And then what happens? Oh, he's not even in the movie very much. And then he turns out to be the bitch of what is Talia al Ghul. And it's like, oh, God. Why did you do that, Christopher Nolan? And this is the really fucked up thing, is that Robin Williams wanted to play the Riddler in this movie. And just imagining, like, guys, what? Oh my God, it would have been so epic if instead of making this stupid, there's like a nuclear bomb with Bane and shit, instead of making this stupid shit, they should have made Batman versus the Riddler. And that would have been, it would have been so much better. Just imagining Robin Williams as the Riddler. It's like that's really unfortunate we didn't get to see that. Instead, we had to wait and see the Zodiac Killer and fucking shitty ass Matt Reeves Twilight Boy Batman. So number 6, this is gonna surprise you guys, is the Screwballs trilogy. This is a trilogy of sex comedies, and obviously a lot of people don't even know what these are anymore, because it's so funny, like, whenever one of these woke losers goes back and watches, like, an 80s movie, and they're like, oh my God, why are they sexualizing a high school girl? And people are quick to point out, this is not an actual high school girl. This is an actress who's in her 20s, and this is what they did back in the 80s. They made these really hilarious sex comedies all the time, and it was like a whole genre. Like, people on Twitter, they are genuinely, like, concerned that there's, like, this whole genre of movies where they used to be good, and, you know, back when comedy was really good. You have movies like Screwballs, like American Pie. You know, it's like these people are just completely illiterate in the art of movies. You know, they're just so focused on whatever is current. They're just so focused on Marvel. You know, they don't even know movies exist. Like, believe me, even the anti-SJWs, like all these people who I'm talking about on Twitter, there was all these anti-SJWs. They got so upset that I was, like, championing these movies like Screwballs. And honestly, Screwballs #1 is a masterpiece in comedy. It's all about this group of guys, and they all get put in detention for various reasons because of this really mean, bitchy girl at school named Purity. And so they come up with this plan where one of them should sleep with her and, you know, just humiliate her and break her heart. And then they all try and they fail, and it's really funny and hilarious. And honestly, I want to watch Screwballs after this video. Fuck it. And then what ends up happening is they all take her to this school assembly, or they all go to the school assembly, and they rig it so that it's magnetic, and it pulls off her dress, and like they put stuff in her dress too to make it pull off, and then, you know, she's naked in this school assembly, and it's hilarious because it's like, yeah, F you. I mean, the whole movie, you're just wanting them to get back at this terrible, terrible mean girl. And it's just so satisfying at the very end of the movie. You know, her clothes completely rip off, and everyone is just like, yeah. A very good ending to a movie. Very good. Very high art. Very high art. And then you have, oh yeah, and these movies did not have you-know-whats, too. You know, I don't want to say their titles because I don't even respect their titles enough to say them. Let's just call them the sex police. You know how every movie and TV show nowadays with a sex scene, they always have the sex police on set. Well, this is back when they didn't do gay shit like that. And, you know, they made Screwballs, and it was a masterpiece. You know, they can't handle that anymore, because they gotta have their sex police around. And then you have part 2, which is arguably better than the first one, in every way. It's a lot funnier. There's actually an interesting story in terms of, it's basically about this group of guys, and they're like playing this game of like one-upping each other, doing various things, and I won't say anything more. Like I spoiled the first one. It ends up where they reveal two other high-ranking authority figures in the school instead of a mean girl. And so the second one, great movie. The third one, Screwball 3, Screwball Hotel. This is a very funny, underrated movie. It's basically about this group of kids at this military school or something. And then they get sent to this hotel, or I can't even remember the plot because I only watched it one time when I was like 13 or 14. And at this hotel, they get up to all these antics. I can't even really remember, but I do remember that it was a very funny movie. And again, this is a consistently good trilogy. I could put on any one of these 3 movies and enjoy them and not be like, ugh, that third one, ugh. So I would highly recommend the Screwballs trilogy. Number 5 is Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Now, first off, this is probably, I know I'm gonna blow people's minds. Diary of a Wimpy Kid is probably the greatest casting in movie history. And I just left 10 seconds for people to click off the video because I knew that people were going to go like, ugh, you know, they're going to freak out. I'm serious, though. You have Greg, Roderick, even the little baby Manny, the dad, the mom, Rowley. Everyone in this movie is perfectly, in the trilogy, everyone in this trilogy is perfectly cast. It is, the casting is on another level. Like, I would trust the casting director for this movie series. I would trust them with any movie ever, if it's an adaptation. The first one is a really short, simple, fun, funny retelling of the first book. A lot of elements of friendship between Greg and Rowley. I really love the first movie. Then you have the second movie, where they took who is everyone's fan favorite character, Roderick the brother, and the second one is just basically all about him. And it's glorious. It's just very, very good and very, very... It's like they said, you know, let's give the audience what they want. Like, I know it is an adaptation of the second book, but it still felt so much more satisfying than, you know, a lot of these sequels where instead of giving people what they want, they do the opposite of that. You know, like Doctor Strange 2, for example. You know, we wanted a Doctor Strange movie, and instead we got a fucking WandaVision movie. Like, ugh. Or Black Panther 2, which wasn't even Black Panther 2. It was fucking Feminazi Panther. And then you have Dog Days Part 3, which I think is really underrated. I have a lot of fun with it. I think it's hilarious. Obviously, you have a lot of Holly, and I used to like her a lot in these movies. And I really love how the series ends. I love how you can feel some growth in the characters. Like, a lot of people like tried to criticize this movie by saying the kids are just getting too old. They're not resembling the characters anymore. And it's like, I thought that actually worked in this movie's benefit. You know, it actually made you feel like they were growing up in the movie and, you know, growing as characters. And so I really love this trilogy. I think number 1 is like an A-. The second one's like an A. The third one is like a B+. So how can you go wrong with that trilogy? Number 4 is Spider-Man. Spider-Man, I just watched it the other day. Definitely, probably the greatest superhero origin of all time. I mean, people say, it's so funny, people always say, I don't want to see Uncle Ben get killed for the millionth time. Well, guess what? Like, I watched this first Spider-Man movie over and over again, and I can't stop watching Uncle Ben get killed over and over again, and I don't even care. Like, I don't mind it at all. And so the thing with people, like, pretending like, you know, like, why do we have to see that again? It's like, well, if you watch this first movie at least once or twice a year, then you see it happen at least once or twice a year. So, I don't know. You have Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, perfect comic book movie villain. You have Mary Jane, she's okay. She's not really... She's the weakest part of the trilogy, honestly. I really wish that her character would have been better in part 3. You know, but the thing is that she wasn't the main character, and so I didn't mind. And at the heart of this first movie, you have, in my opinion, is definitely the greatest superhero of all time, which is Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man. He's utterly perfect in the role. He's flawless. And I could watch the movie over and over again. The only thing that I will say is that the third act is very weak and rushed. You know, it feels like in the second act, there's this new beginning of a story where Green Goblin meets Spider-Man, and he says, let's be partners. And then after that, like 20 minutes later, the movie's over. And I just felt like, honestly, I do think that the third act in this movie should have been longer, and it should have been a little bit better. Like, I didn't really like the parade scene, or not, was it a parade? That whole sequence with, like, him and Green Goblin jumping on balloons and fighting each other and everything, and then that whole stupid thing at the end with the school bus and Mary Jane in the car on the bridge. I didn't really like that, but I did like the final fight. So, and then the second one. The second Spider-Man is the greatest superhero movie ever made. It improves on everything about the first movie. You know, people, when they used to criticize this movie, back when they used to pretend like it wasn't good, because there were a lot of people who did that. Let's not lie. they always said, like, this movie's just the first movie, but longer and bigger. And it's like, yeah, kinda. But, like, that's a good thing that it really took these elements from the original movie and improved on them and did different things with them. And I really think this is just, it's one of the greatest movies ever made. Doc Ock is a fantastic movie villain. The train fight is the greatest superhero movie fight of all time. The whole arc with him losing his powers and then having to get them back and fight Doc Ock is just really, really awesome. And then the underbelly of Harry becoming like this villain himself and starting to not like Peter and their friendship kind of breaking up near the end. Really, really perfect. I mean, this is just, it's a perfect movie. And then you have the third one. and and the third one, oh, I was so disappointed in the third movie when it came out. I remember watching it while I was playing Bulletstorm on PS3, and but you know what? This movie was a product of studio interference. Sam Raimi wanted to make a Sandman movie with Harry as the Green Goblin, I guess, a little bit. And the studio forced him to add in Venom. And if the studio hadn't have forced that on him, I really think that the third one would be an epic superhero movie. You know, I'm not going to pretend like it's a good movie, because there are people who do that too. We all know who those people are. But you can see all the elements of what would have been a fantastic Spider-Man movie. You can see all the elements of what would have been a great Sandman movie. I mean, the fights with Sandman were pretty damn good. And then the thing with Harry at the end, where Harry comes back and helps him, a really, really nice moment. How their friendship gets back together. And then, of course, he dies, and that's a really sad death in a movie. So I'm just going to ignore the bad stuff and move on, because, wow. There's a lot of other bad stuff in this movie that I'm just kind of ignoring. So all in all, though, you have two epic movies, and then you have one movie where you can go either way and just try to like the good parts and then pretend that the other parts don't exist. Other parts as in, you know, I did like the emo Peter sequence, by the way. You know, a lot of people misunderstand that sequence and they pretend like it's not supposed to be comedic. And it's like, yeah, that's the whole point of it. It's supposed to be funny because he's not what he thinks he is. Like, the symbiote made him just really overly confident, but it didn't change the fact that he's a nerd and that he doesn't even know how to be cool or look cool, and so he's going around on the street and doing these stupid dances and shit. And see, that was a lot like that movie Crime Wave that I reviewed by Sam Raimi. You know, that was a very Crime Wavy-esque part. And I will say too, you know something else? You could pretend like Crime Wave is the original Spider-Man movie. And you can watch Crime Wave, and then you can watch Spider-Man 1 and 2, and then you have a flawless trilogy. So then number 3 is Back to the Future. The first one is one of the greatest movies ever made. It's a flawless movie. it's already been talked about. And then the second one, I really enjoy the second one, even though I know that it is a bad movie in terms of writing. Like, I feel like with the second one, it was so odd how in the first one, you have that great teaser at the end where you think you're going to be in the future the whole second movie. And then in the second movie, what do you know? Almost half of the movie takes place in the first movie in the 50s. And I was like, God, what a ripoff. Like, I wanted to see the whole movie in the future. I didn't want to see going back to the 50s again. But I will say, now that I've watched it as an adult, I think the whole third act is the best part of the movie. I think the thing with the older Biff going back to the younger Biff in the first movie is a really good storyline, and I loved how part 2 Marty is solving all these problems for part 1 Marty. Like that whole thing at the dance where he has to drop the sandbags on the bullies, that was awesome. It was awesome how they were able to, like, make a movie around a movie they've already made. Like, I really feel bad that the third one, I don't know what they were thinking. Like, I know a lot of people love the third one. They pretend like it's a good movie. I don't care for it. I really don't care for it. I really don't understand the appeal. It feels like a huge letdown once again. Like the second one already was a letdown, and then the third one was just like a nail in the coffin of the trilogy. The thing is, though, is that in this trilogy, you have at the core, you have Marty and Doc Brown. I was almost going to say Doc Ock. And those two characters and their chemistry, their back and forth, the two actors playing them, it's just something that, you don't see all the time. And it's just so perfect. It's just so good, and it's just such a good pairing, such a good duo, that even though the third one's a bad movie, I really love the trilogy just for the fact that you get to see Marty McFly and Doc Brown for those 3 times. And something even better? I feel like the video game Back to the Future, the game, is better than parts 2 and 3 combined. So after you watch this trilogy, you can go play the video game series by Telltale Games, which highly underrated video game company. By the way, I really love their games. That video game is amazing, and it gives you everything that you could want. It just felt like in the sequels they didn't really understand what the fans were looking for. Like it felt like that part in the first one where he plays Johnny Be Good, and then everyone's just kind of confused and they don't really like it. And he's like, I guess you guys aren't ready for that one, but your kids are going to love it. That's what it feels like with the sequels, the way that in the second one, you're expecting the whole movie to be in the future, and then, nope, not going to do that. And then the third one, I don't know what they were thinking with the third one. The third one's a piece of crap. I mean, do you honestly like watching the third one and like watching the goofy, zany antics in the Wild West with Biff as a Wild West character, and it's like, God, this is trash. But at least they haven't made anything else so far. Like, at least you still have just Back to the Future 1, 2, and 3. I think that that's something to be commended for. Number 2 is Sleepaway Camp. Sleepaway Camp, number 1, is Friday the 13th, but good. It's scarier than Friday the 13th, has a better villain than Pamela Voorhees from Friday the 13th. The kills are better, somewhat. The twist at the end is unforgettable, and it is a fantastic horror movie. The second one is one of the greatest horror movies ever made, where they combined comedy and horror to create the ultimate 80s movie. There's so many boobs in this movie, you could probably do a boob ranking. You could just rank individually all the different chests in this movie, and that I'll do that. I will do that. The only problem would be I wouldn't be able to show them because YouTube thinks it's not appropriate for some reason. This movie is just, and the fact that they recast the main character and still they were able to make this great movie, I think is another interesting thing. Like, after having to recast the main character, who would have thought that this movie would have been any good at all? I mean, when everyone talks about Sleepaway Camp, they talk about Felissa Rose. And to think, like, they recast her, Pamela Springsteen, and somehow it was really, really good. And then the third one's a little bit less good, but it is a lot of fun. It's very funny, and it's another great, 80s-esque movie. And again, this is a solid trilogy. If you watch this trilogy back to back, each movie, you're going to have a great time. Number 1, which is what I'm sure is going to make people have an uncontrollable outrage. Number 1 is the George Romero Dead trilogy. You have Night of the Living Dead, which is a classic, perfect, flawless horror film, low-budget horror film that shows you how to make a really good low-budget horror movie. It's a scary movie. It's creepy. It's atmospheric. The second one, you have Dawn of the Dead. Perfect 70s horror movie. It's really fun to see the mall. These people trying to survive the apocalypse in a mall, having to kill zombies, and it's like they're living with the zombies. Like, they're controlling the zombies and, where they can go and where they can't go. And it's really intense and really scary. And it's the ultimate wish, though. Just think about how cool it would be if there was an apocalypse and you're just in a huge mall where you can do whatever you want all the time. You can eat whatever you want. Well, for the most part, until the food runs out. And it just seems like a very interesting, wish fulfillment thing. I don't want to say that because it's nobody wishes that there's an apocalypse, but ideally, if there was one, you'd want to be in this huge, fun mall. Sorry. I just had a weird sensation. I don't know what that was. And then the third movie, Day of the Dead, is a really good 80s zombie horror film. I haven't seen Day of the Dead as much, honestly. I haven't seen it, I think, more than once. But this is another one where I think that it's a really great movie from what I remember. And the effects are perfect in this movie by Tom Savini. So yeah, I would totally recommend Day of the Dead. And please like this video, comment, tell me what you think about my top 10 movie trilogies. And then please subscribe to this channel if you'd like to see more of these ranking videos. Goodbye, everybody. See you soon.